1.
Good morning. We filed for electronic device consideration review. Welcome to the May 15th, 2023 Finance Authority review. My name is Councilman. Quorum is physically present at the HART Administrative Office, is 1201 East 7th Avenue, Florida Conference Room, and that's all the board members. Others may be available through communication media technology. Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Staff, could you do roll call vote, please?
Chair Schisler,
Here.
Director Williams, or Committee Member Williams?
Here.
Committee Member Knight?
Here.
Committee Member Kemp? I'm sorry, you do have a quorum, sir.
Thank you very much. Any public comment? Doesn't seem to be any.
No, sir.
There's no one scheduled to speak. There's nobody's present to talk. Fine. This will conclude the public input section of the meeting. Next in the package, you should have minutes from the April 17th Finance and Audit Committee. If everybody's had a chance to review those, is there a motion to approve?
So moved.
Just second. For a motion is second. Staff, please record a vote.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp? Yes. Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we have presentations. Ms. Kirk, is the auditor here yet? Okay, so we'll go ahead. We're going to go ahead and shuffle that whenever our auditor does arrive. But to start off, we'll begin with the fiscal 2023 proposed program of projects. I would like to point out that this presentation is supported the committee action item 5A on the agenda. Ms. Loretta Kirk, Chief Financial Officer, you're recognized to present.
Thank you. Director Schisler, members of the Finance and Audit Committee, and to Mr. Drainville, good morning. This presentation actually kicks off the fiscal year 24 budget process. FTA mandates that transit agencies develop a specific list of projects referred to as the program of projects in order to receive FTA Section 5307 Urbanized Area Formula funds. We also seek public input on the projects, and we have to hold a public hearing. All this is required by FTA. In addition to the Section 5307 funds, we also receive other formula funds that I'll discuss today. The funds that we'll discuss today will be budgeted in the fiscal year 24 budget to fund the capital project and to reimburse HART for certain operating expenses. Before I continue, I do want to recognize the member of the Budget and Grant staff responsible for developing the program of projects, Ms. Gail Torres. I'd ask that she stand and be recognized. Thank you. So I just stand here today to present the program of projects. She does all the work for me. And then I also want you to recognize the new Director of Budget and Grants, Justin Loeffner. This is his first day. He's been here for about an hour. Let's recognize him. And he'll be standing before you for future meetings in many cases. So this is what we're going to cover today. The fiscal year 24 budget calendar as it relates to the program of projects. We'll talk about the apportionment of federal funds, the various formula funds that we receive from FTA, the proposed program of projects, our public outreach efforts, which again are mandated. We'll talk about other federal funding, and then the proposed resolution. This is the budget calendar. So today I'm presenting on the program of projects. After this, if the committee desires, I'll propose on the I'll present on the proposed operating budget, capital plan, and the capital budget. Then on June 5th, we have 2 action items. Certainly to approve the program of projects and to approve the proposed operating budget, capital plan, and capital budget. We'll have additional presentations on the budget. And then in September, as usual, we'll hold 2 public hearings. The first public hearing for you to adopt the proposed millage rates and the tentative budget. And then the final public hearing to adopt the final millage rate and the final budget. This is our apportionment of the 5307 funds. The total that were provided to this region is $43,089,214. And you can see on the second line, HART will receive almost $18.7 million, or 43.29% of the apportionment. And you can see the other transit systems in the Tampa to St. Petersburg urbanized area that received the funds. This is our proposed, I'm sorry.
Just, why isn't this moving on our screens here?
Would you like me to go back?
Yeah, just to do that slide. It's just one slide, right?
It's not.
I just have trouble seeing that. Maybe you can keep going, or
I'm fine waiting. I want to make sure you can follow,
thank you.
if it's okay with the chair.
Huh. It's weird too. Okay.
I know, I'm so sorry.
Oh, there we go. Okay. Yeah.
Okay. I just want to go back to this slide to make sure that everyone sees the apportionment. I know that's always of interest to this board, that we're receiving 43.29% of the total apportionment to the Tampa St. Petersburg urbanized area. Okay. This is,
If I don't mean to, but it is, and it's just a good guide for us to compare, and I never do understand exactly why. And I know we've asked this before. The UZA formula, which is split now with T-BARTA, Pasco, and T-BARTA soon to go away, Hillsborough, and Pinellas. And and I know we've seen that formula before. It just concerns me. I know that Pinellas has a 3/4 mil and a higher tax base, so they do collect more money. They do have some opting out communities there. We have Plant City that opts out. They have some others, but I'm concerned with the population difference, us being closer to 1.5 million, Pinellas being closer to 1,950,000, and one-third our physical size in miles. It just, I still, I'll just, we've discussed this before, but it just seems to me as if we have to look at that there is, I don't understand exactly why we're getting less. It seems concerning.
Okay, and yes, we have had this conversation, and I can certainly, and we also know that PSTA does the calculations, and that's mandated by the governor. But I can certainly share, if the board desires, I can share the calculation for the split.
Please.
I'll make sure that the interim CO sends it to you.
Okay.
Okay. All right, so this is a proposed program of projects. We are proposing to spend $15.5 million of the apportionment for operating projects and $3.1 million on capital projects, again for a total of $18.6 million. If you recall, last year we spent the majority of the money on capital projects because we had some maintenance that we had to invest in. And so last year, our operating projects were $4.4 million, and our capital projects were $13 million. And so we kind of reversed that because we know we're on a financial cliff. This is the only federal dollars that we can use and flex to operating. So in this case, 5307 can be used for operating or capital expenses. And that's the only grant that we have. All the other federal grants have to be used for capital. So in this case, understanding that we are challenged financially in the operating fund, we have allocated most of the grants to operating. And you can see the projects that we use for operating preventive maintenance. It's a operating expense in terms of capital grants in terms of 5307. Then we use ADA paratransit, the tire lease, and preventive maintenance for streetcar. And then you can see the various capital projects that we've allocated the $3.1 million to. I'll just pause to see if there's any questions on this slide.
Anybody have any questions? Okay.
As I stated earlier, we must engage in public outreach for 5307 funds, and these are our communication methods. We actually started on Friday to post into the 3 newspapers, as well as, we'll use all of our social media, all of the media that we have available to us to make sure that the public knows about the program of projects and has an opportunity to attend the public hearing that you can see will be scheduled for June the 1st on the last line. We're also mandated by FTA to send a letter to private transportation providers so that they also know what we're spending our 5307 funds on. And you can see those letters will go out May 18th.
Who might that include?
We have a list of contractors. I'll just pause to see if Gail has that list, but we do have a list of contractors, private transportation providers in the area. Okay, do you have the list with you? Can you get it? Thank you. Okay, so we'll answer that question in a few minutes.
Okay, thank you.
They are small providers, but they have to know that we do receive this money, and they have an opportunity, to just make sure that we're not spending any money on projects that compete with their ability to survive and provide service in the area. Okay, this is a list of other federal funds. The top 2 are formula funds. State of Good Repair will receive $982,000. Bus and Bus Facilities will receive $1.5 million. And then each year we do get a State of Good Repair, a surface transportation block grant from FDOT. That's flexed from FHWA to the FTA for $4 million. So our other federal grants that will receive $6.5 million. So with that, the recommendation that we're proposing you this morning is that the Board of Directors will approve this program of projects and authorize the interim CEO to apply for and accept all fiscal year 23 Federal Transit Administration funding, understanding that we have to have your authority to apply for grants, just like we have to have your authority to apply for state grants, and you just approve that resolution in your consent agenda, and we need that same authority at the federal level.
Okay. Does anybody have any questions at this point? We have two ways we could handle this. We could do this individually now, or will that break up the agenda too much, Julie? Would you rather?
If you're more comfortable doing this individually, that I don't have a problem with you breaking up the agenda. Do you have any issues with handling it that way?
I'd like to go ahead and, get done what we can get
Your
done.
microphone's off.
Pardon me? Oh,
I'm having
sorry.
trouble hearing you.
No, I'm too far back. If it's all right with the rest of the committee, given the presentation on the fiscal year 2023 proposed program of projects, we will be we will be recommending to pass on to the full board for final approval. We can handle this individually. That way, if we have any questions, we can bug Ms. Kirk and then, lop off something towards the end of the agenda. So if nobody has any questions, I'll entertain a motion to move it to the full board for the next meeting.
I agree with that.
Okay.
Moving it.
You making the motion?
Yes.
Okay. We have a second? Second. Okay. Danielle, roll call vote, please.
Committee Chair Schisler?
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passed unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. All right, next on the agenda, auditor's not here yet? I don't see anybody come in. Okay, next on the agenda is the fiscal year 2024 proposed operating budget, proposed capital budget, and a 5-year capital plan. This presentation is in support of committee action item 5B. Ms. Kirk, you're recognized.
Good morning again to the chair, to the members of the Finance and Audit Committee, and to Mr. Drainville. Does everyone see the presentation on their screen in front of them? Okay. Okay. There you go.
I'm sorry. What I'd like to do at this point is our auditor just did come in to the room, and we do have an audit report, which I'd like to take up at this point if there's no objection from the rest of the committee members, and then we'll circle back to this particular item. So therefore, she doesn't have to sit through all of our trials and tribulations. So with no objection, I'm going to move forward to the last item, the last presentation on the HART audit report from Lauren Strope, from Cherry Beckert, our external auditors. This presentation is in support of committee action item 5C. So we're just going to take a little bit out of order. Ms. Strope, you're recognized to present. Welcome.
Perfect. Thank you so much. And I apologize for I'm a little late. Good morning. My name is Lauren Strope, and I served as your single audit partner. Thank you so much for the opportunity to talk to you today about the nature, the timing, and the extent of the audit procedures that were completed as for the year ending September 30th, 2022. So here's just kind of a brief agenda of some of the things that we're going to go over today, but please don't hesitate to ask any questions as they come up. This is your client service team, so it's not just me. There are a lot of folks that work on the audit, so I just wanted to mention them real quick. Really getting into the heart of the presentation, the results of the audit. We're substantially complete with the audit. We are pending a couple of legal letters, and then we will send management the management representation letter, and once that's signed, we'll be prepared to issue our report. We're prepared to issue an unmodified report on your financial statements. That's the highest level of assurance we as the external auditor can provide. We follow a variety of different standards when we complete your audit, one of which is the government auditing standards. Those require us to take a look at internal control over financial reporting, and we do have a couple of comments in that letter this year. We'll go over that in detail in a couple more slides. Additionally, we had to complete the single audit, both federal and state. That does require that we take a look at internal controls over compliance and compliance itself. And we're issuing a no comment letter there, meaning that we did not find any issues with internal control over compliance or with compliance itself as it relates to those audits. Chapter 10.550 rules of the Auditor General of the State of Florida do require us to issue a management letter. And so draft of that is the second to the last letter in the report. That is being issued as a clean letter this year. Last but certainly not least, we do have to opine on HART's compliance with investment policies here in the state of Florida, and we are issuing a clean or no comment letter on that as well. So I mentioned internal control over financial reporting, and again, we don't actually audit to find issues with internal controls, but if we do become aware of significant deficiencies or material weaknesses as we complete our audit, we are required to communicate those to you. A material weakness is a deficiency in internal controls, so where a material transaction can go through and be posted incorrectly without being caught by management. This year, we have two deficiencies that we do consider to be material weaknesses in internal control. The first relates to financial close process. So basically when management comes in and closes all the books and pokes all the accruals that need to be made, we had several adjusting journal entries, and we'll go into those related to that process. The second, and that is actually a repeat from last year as well. The second is new this year, and that relates to revenue recognition over grants. So there were unexecuted grants. Revenue was recognized over those. Really, you should not be recognizing revenue until you have the executed grant. So that had to be backed up. So corrected and uncorrected misstatements. What a corrected misstatement is after management provides us with the trial balance. If we as the auditors have to say these entries need to be made to bring this in accordance with GAAP or generally accepted accounting principles, that would be an audit adjustment. So we had several, some somewhat related to last year, like the inventory balances. The surtax was incorrectly posted to equity as opposed to being recorded as an expense. You had an over-accrual in your compensated absences. There was a $150,000 liability that could not be supported that was written off. There was an entry that related to a reclass of FDA funding that was previously posted to the ad valorem. There was overstatement in capital assets, and then there was an overstatement in depreciation expense related to those capital assets. Uncorrected misstatements are the exact same situation, only the financial statements are not corrected. Last year, there was actually an overstatement of revenue in the amount of $849,000, and that related to unexecuted grants as well. So it was this year that it was discovered that there was unexecuted grants to which revenue was being recognized. There was some recognized in the previous year related to that. Just some qualitative aspects of accounting practices. If you look in note 11, you did adopt a new accounting policy this year. That was GASB 87 related to leases. So there were some leases that were brought on your books as it relates to that. Basically, all operating leases went away and everything's kind of being treated like the old capital lease used to be treated. We do spend a lot of time on related party relationships and transactions. We did not know anything that was outside of what management told us during the course of our audit. For the purposes of this letter, significant or unusual transactions are always specific to the entity. The most significant or unusual transaction that you had this year was the repayment of that surtax, which is showing up as an expense on your statement of activities. Inherently, the financial statements are not just all hard numbers. There's a lot of management estimate and judgment that goes into creating GAAP financials. So as you can imagine, we as the auditor spend a lot of time looking at those estimates and judgments to make sure that they're fair and reasonable to the financials as a whole. Some big ones that you have relate to pension and OPEB, and those are related to actuarial reports. There's the estimate of leases, the estimate of your compensated absences, the useful life of your capital assets, which then impacts the depreciation expense, the estimates of claims and judgments, including IBNR, and the estimate of the allowance for doubtful receivables, and the fair value of investments. And again, we found all of those fair in relation to the financials as a whole. We do believe that the financial statement disclosures are neutral, consistent, and clear. As far as independence is concerned, it's very important as your independent auditor that we retain our independence, and we do. We do provide limited assistance with GASB 87 this year, and we also complete the auditor section of the data collection form, which is just an upload of all your federal audit information. So again, we are independent of HART, both in fact and in appearance. Just a couple other required communications. We're pleased to report that we didn't have any difficulties in management and coming to accounting treatment. There were no outside auditor consultations. We will receive that management representation letter, which will be the report date. Basically, it says that everything that management told us or gave us during the course of the audit is true to the best of their knowledge and belief. In some cases, management might decide to consult with other CPAs. In that event, we would just want to make sure that they have the same information that we had to hopefully get to the same conclusion. We have no other findings or issues that we need to report to you. We do not audit for fraud or illegal acts, but if we became aware of them during the course of our audit, we would communicate to those to you, and this would not be the first time that you're hearing of that. We are not of reason to believe that HART will not continue as a going concern entity. Just some other matters in your financial statements. There's a lot of supplemental information. We do what's called an in relation to opinion to that, meaning that anytime it should tie back to the audited information, we ensure that it does. Just a couple upcoming things that are going to impact you next year. Probably the big one on this list for you will be GASB 96, and those are the subscription-based IT arrangements. Basically, it's the exact same thing as the lease standard, only it picks up anything that's subscription-based related to IT. And with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any members of the committee have any questions? I do. In your opinion, given the two findings that you recorded and the adjustments that are associated with them, in your opinion, does the remedial actions instituted by the finance department, are they enough to prevent this from occurring again? And are you as our auditor satisfied with the actions taken and the future plans moving forward?
Sure. So as it relates to the first finding that you have, it is a repeat finding from last year. So what we do each year is we come in, we take a look at that corrective action plan that was provided by management the previous year, and then we look into that and say, was that properly implemented or do we still have an issue? This year, with finding number one, we still have an issue. So they've provided a new corrective action plan, but our responsibility is to come in the next year and to test that after hopefully it has been implemented. So if it is implemented correctly, yes, I do believe that it would correct the problem.
Perfect. Okay. And what about,
With the second one, it's the same thing,
Same
but again,
thing.
I just can't provide you any assurance because we come in the year after and test to make sure that it was properly implemented.
with the grants themselves, were they properly approved by the board of directors, or was there a time lag? Because I know we had kicked some cans down the road, and I wanted to see if anything we had done had a negative influence or negative factor in that finding.
Understood. My understanding of it, and you will have to verify with management, was that it related to the FTA not properly executing the grant.
Okay. All right. Good deal. All right. Cool. All right. Ms. Kirk, you have any comments that you want to make regarding the two findings?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, because the good news is, I just want to repeat, we have a clean opinion, and we have no issues with compliance and other things, but we do have these findings that we do need to address. And we have talked about, I'll start with the last one first, and that is the grants the recognition of grant revenue. And just so that you know, we have pre-award authority on most of our federal grants, which FTA gives us the authority to contract prior to the grant award and execution. And because we had that pre-award authority, we actually incorrectly said that FTA owed us the money. But because we didn't have an executed grant, we should not have recognized that revenue. That has ceased now, so that will not be a repeat. Staff will not, as soon as we found that out, we do not record that revenue, and so hopefully it won't ever happen again. On the first finding, and the auditors have always graciously said it's because of staffing, which is true. And you know that we were aggressively trying to recruit. As a matter of fact, we had a director of budget and grants, we had a CFO, and we had another accountant that we actually offered a job to, and they did not accept it because of finances. So since towards the end of this fiscal year that they're auditing, we have hired 4 very strong people. We have the process for reconciliation, and so now we can implement those processes. And we also know in our haste to give the auditors, we should have never given them a trial balance before we did all the reconciliations, but we did. And once they have the trial balance and our draft financial statements, anything made after that, of course, gets into their report. So we don't expect that to happen. We still have a few more critical positions that our interim CEO is going to allow us to fill, and hopefully we'll be fully staffed or close to fully staffed and have the staff on hand that will help us avoid this in the future. So I'm very confident that we can address these 2 findings.
Okay, very good. Again, keeping in mind that it is an unmodified opinion, and you can't really do much better than that, and hopefully we'll have these other issues fixed and won't have it again in this current year audit. Very
Thank
good.
you.
Okay, yes, ma'am.
Just, Ms. Kirk, just to, what do we consider a fully staffed finance department to be? Like, how many people are we talking about? How many people do we have or have we had?
I have the organization chart if you allow me to get it, but I think we are right-sized in our organization chart. It's just that we have to fill those critical positions. If you recall, we had many vacancies in the finance area, even when I first started. And we've aggressively, unfortunately, several people who we were trying to recruit did not live in the Tampa area, and because of the expense of living in the Tampa area, their request was too much, and we couldn't honor those requests. So we're still trying to get people to apply. But I can get the organization chart and tell you how many people are in that area. But we will be right sized if we can fill all the vacancies. And so right now, I believe we have 2 critical vacancies. At least 2 critical vacancies. I'm looking at Laura Izzo. She's the director. Do you want me to step up? Yeah. She knows the answer to this question.
Because I just did the budget and the head counts. The Department of Budgeting and Grants, we were without the director the entire year of this audit. One of the analysts also left during the course of the audit who handles the state and local. So questions and issues regarding the state and local grants, there was nobody there with seasoned experience. We also, during the course of this audit, moved a person into the new position of capital assets, which had been vacant for a good 8 months into fiscal year 2022. And that was one of the audit findings, the $2.5 million that was being performed by a brand new person in that role. As far as the accounting department, director of finance, we've got, retail sales, payroll, AP, that's not impacted. It's the accounting and finance department. And during the course of this whole audit, we were essentially without a director of finance. I was working in both roles as a manager and a director, and we were understaffed in the accounting department. So was the constant switching of hats. And we did hire 2 new people in fiscal year '22 in the accounting department, one to handle the cash management and one who's primarily a Flamingo Affairs specialist accountant. So essentially, we really only had one seasoned accountant in the accounting department the whole year we were being audited, and that person really only handled accounts receivables, and we had the clerk that corresponds to that. We did have another accountant that was working part-time in the evenings, who is now our manager of accounting. She came on board in February. And she was very helpful, but more of the just keeping up with the volume of work versus functioning as a manager, or now myself as a director, where we're looking, from 10,000 feet up and seeing the bigger picture versus being buried in the trenches. So I came on board in December of '21, when we were doing the prior year's audit. And that was when we were grossly understaffed. And this is my first full year for fiscal year 2022, and we were still understaffed. But now that we have this manager of accounting on board, myself as the director of finance, we're getting ready to bring in an accountant who will be a higher level and analytical thinker, and we've brought on the director of budgets and grants that can oversee that department, and we have the fixed asset accountant a little bit more seasoned in that department, and we're still looking to fill the budget analyst position for state and local. So if those positions are filled, and we're, almost 80% there, and we've already implemented changes since October for this year, I have high expectations for the fiscal year '23 audit.
Thank you, Laura. And to summarize, in Laura's department, financial operations, we have 19 positions budgeted, 17 are filled, and we have 2 vacancies. In the budget and grants, 5 people are budgeted. We had 3 people for the duration of the audit. Justin was just started today, so we do have another vacancy. So we'll continue to work with HR to fill those vacancies. And as I stated before and confirmed by Laura, once we get the quality staff that we need in those 2 departments, we should be able to avoid these audit findings.
Very good, thank you. Director Knight, you had your hand up before.
Yeah. Yes, thank you. You were saying that some of the vacancy and people, putting in for jobs out of state, and there was a lot of, calls for what they want. How about local? Is it any local people that's putting in for with the experience?
Thank you for that question, Director Knight. And we constantly work with HR to identify, and, we're asking to look at the local GFOA, Government Finance Officers Association, other local organizations that may be able to, refer people to HART. So we are looking locally.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Ms. Williams?
Thank you for the overview. My question is centered on the organizational structure. I think Commissioner Kemp mentioned it before that we'd like to include that in our documents and just for each committee. So we have a good understanding, because you seem to have a good understanding about what we have and what we don't have. I just don't know that holistically, how that looks and what is filled and what's not filled, or what is the overall number we're looking for. Then one conversation we have where we need to let people go because we have too many people, and then in this instance we don't have enough people. So if there's a way to bring that together for us, and so we have a better, broader understanding of it, at least deeper understanding of it, and what impact or risks are we taking as a result of certain vacancies as well. I just think that when we get hit with an audit and looks like things are, what we've done is working, except there were 2 instances that were repeated. So maybe some understanding of how those processes take place and where we see viability to probably move around and so forth. I know you know how to do this more so than us, but I certainly would like to see the org structure for the different departments and overall for HART, because what is that number?
Okay. Excellent question again, Ms. Williams. And that's the same assignment that your interim CEO has us working on today. And you will hear those numbers during my next presentation.
Oh, wow. Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, very good. Any other questions? Appear to be none. All right, our task here is to formulate a motion to accept the report as given and forward it on to the full board for final consideration and acceptance.
Second.
So anybody make a motion? Okay, we have a motion and a second. Ms. Danielle, could you do roll call vote, please?
Committee Chair Schisler,
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, sir.
Very
you.
good. Thank you very much. Okay, thank you, Lauren, for all that you guys have done, and we're going to move on to some boring stuff, so I'm sure you have other things that you want to participate in.
So much for your time, and I'll enjoy reading about it when I read the board minutes.
Thank you, thank you. Okay, the final presentation then would be the fiscal year 2024 proposed operating budget, proposed capital budget, and 5-year capital plan. This presentation is in support of Committee Action Item 5B. Ms. Kirk, you're recognized again.
Thank you again. Before I move forward, we do have a list of the public transportation providers in the area, the question that you asked when we did the PLP, and it's been passed out as I speak.
Thank you, madam.
So as was stated, I'm going to present the fiscal year 24 proposed operating budget, proposed capital budget, and the 5-year capital plan. This is actually the interim CEO's proposed budget. The intent is to discuss the proposed budget and submit this proposed budget to the members of HART, the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and Temple Terrace in compliance with the HART Charter. The proposed budget is subject to change based on feedback from this committee, the board, and additional review by Mr. Drainfield and staff. So I want to stress that this is a base budget. This is the first look at the budget, and based on future deliberations and review, it may change before we get to the final approval in September. Now, I do have a staff member that works on this budget for me. So if Moise Pluvois is here, did he step out? Can somebody get Moise for me? I want you to see the person that's responsible for the budget. I believe in employee recognition. I don't do all this work, and I want to make sure that you see the staff that works on this. When he comes in, I'll introduce him. Okay, this is the presentation overview. We'll talk about the calendar. I just want to talk about a few sections of the HART Charter that deals with budget legislation, talk about our revenue assumptions, just look at schedule for COVID relief funds. We'll talk about projected service. We'll talk about our budget assumptions for expenses, and then just look at the overall operating budget. Then we'll turn to capital. We'll look at the 5-year capital plan. And when I look at that number, I do want to recognize Linda Cressatini. If she could stand up, she's responsible. She leads our capital projects working group, and she's responsible for developing the base capital plan and submitting it to me and the interim CEO. So I just want to recognize her and her team, the capital projects working group. And so I thank you, Linda. So we'll look at the capital plan, the summary, the detail, and then we'll look at the capital budget. the summary in detail, talk about fund reserves, which is always of interest to this board, and finally, the action item and resolution. So this is our budget calendar. Again, it all starts today. And then after today's meeting, as I stated earlier, we'll ask the board to act on 2 items at your June 5th meeting. We'll ask you to act on the Section 5307 program of projects that we just talked about, and then to act on this proposed budget. If it's necessary to amend the fiscal year 23 budget, which we're not sure yet, we will present that recommendation to you on June 26th. And then, in compliance with the HART Charter, we'll hold a public hearing on a proposed amendment, again, if necessary, on July 5th. Moise is here. He's been here all morning, then he disappeared. I just asked Moise to stand up and be recognized. He's a staff person that works on the budget for me, and I just want to recognize him. And he was, I've got to give him a hand. He sticks with me at 11 o'clock p.m. To do things that we need to do for HART. So I just appreciate Moise. Okay, then in July, we'll ask the board to take action on the budget amendment, of course, if necessary. We'll ask for approval of the proposed millage rate because, you know, in addition to doing the HART budget, we have to follow the truth and millage process, the trim process. So we'll ask you to approve the proposed millage rate, the rollback rate, and the date of the public hearing for the budget. And then during the board meeting on July 31st, we'll present on the fiscal year 2024 service plan. Then on August 14th, we'll present on a 5-year capital plan and a 5-year budget. All this is subject to change based on what you want to hear from us, but this is our plan. And then in September, we'll have the 2 public hearings, as I stated. The tentative dates of those public hearings are September 11th and September 25th. However, we can't confirm those dates until they're confirmed by the property appraiser, the Hillsborough County property appraiser. And of course, you know, our public hearings cannot conflict with certain public entities as dictated by law. And so this is our proposed budget. And like I said, it'll change based on feedback from the Finance Committee or the board. In terms of the charter, I think I have 3 slides on this. This just basically lets you know why I'm here today. This is pretty early, but by our charter, it says by the 15th day of June, you know, our CEO has to present to you this proposed operating budget. And so that's why we're doing it today, because this is the last committee meeting before, so we can get it to the board in time to send it to the members of HART. And then on or before July 1st, we have to submit this proposed budget to the legislative bodies of each member of HART. And that's why I said we have to send it to the county, the city, and Temple Terrace. And then this dictates our public hearings on the budget, because, you know, the budget is actually approved not in a board meeting, but in the public hearings that we hold in September. And so we have to do a 14-day notice of the public hearing. The first public hearing is advertised with your tax bills. We don't advertise the first public hearing. We advertise the second public hearing. Then I wanted to include this section of the charter because, you know, as we go through this budget, we are looking for ways to increase revenues or reduce expenses. You know, revenue enhancement, you know, trying to stay off that fiscal cliff. So we had some discussion about maybe we'll just increase the ad valorem tax. And I just want you to see that the limit is in your charter. So if you were to address or want to increase ad valorem tax in addition to going to the voters, you also have to change your charter. So I just want you to know that. Okay, so I'm going to start with the budget assumptions over revenue. For ad valorem taxes, we're budgeting $67.6 million, a 3.5% increase over fiscal year 23, which is probably very conservative. But, last year it increased over 8%, but we don't have the numbers yet from the taxing authority, so we want to start with the base budget at a very conservative number, so we went with 3.5%. And of course, in accordance with the charter, we only budget 95% of the projected proceeds from ad valorem tax. Ad valorem transfer to capital. Again, ad valorem is primarily used for operations, and because our operations needs as much money as it can get, we are not budgeting any transfers to capital. This basically says that the capital fund will have to stand on its own for fiscal year 24. However, we do have $4.5 million in reserves for match and other capital project expenses. And so if there's a need to fund capital projects, if we don't have grants, and if it's the desire of our interim CEO, then we will come back to you and use those reserves for capital projects. But right now, we're not budgeting anything. This is a schedule of the COVID relief funds. We're budgeting the remaining $18 million. You've seen this schedule before. You can see that since fiscal year 20, we have been awarded $103.4 million in COVID relief funds. So in fiscal year 20, we used the CARES Act, fiscal year 21, CARES Act, fiscal year 22, we used the CARISA and the ARP, and then 23, we budgeted ARP, and in 24, we will budget the remaining amount of the ARP, so we're budgeting the $18 million. Understanding that once that $18 million is used, then there is no more COVID relief, and I'm sure you've seen the articles that said that that's over with, there will be no more COVID relief funds. Federal grants, $33.5 million. Again, the portion, the $15.5 million from the program of projects, and then the $18 million from the ARP. That's federal operating grants. State operating grants, our block grant, $6.2 million. If you recall, we had originally thought we would use that money for the heavy maintenance facility, but it's just so important that we use the block grant money that we've always used for state operating, continue to use it for state operating, and find other funding for the heavy maintenance facility. We need that $6.2 million. And then we do have funding for almost $609,000 for the Uptown Circulator. Passenger fares. The passenger fares is based on the projected ridership and the average fare, and that's projected at $8.8 million, and we'll see the projected ridership. We use the average fare of 75 cents to calculate that number. Local contributions, that's primarily from the City of Tampa, Downtown Partnership, and the CRAs for the streetcar. That's budgeted at $1,351,000. Advertising revenue, we're going to continue to budget $1.5 million for that. Other income, $579,998. And then the historic streetcar, that really is a initial number. That's the number we had last year because the free fares are still under discussion, and we do have to develop the streetcar budget, which will be presented to their board next month. So that budget is $742,748. Interest income, $750,000. And then the fund balance transfers for us is going to be two reserves. The last time we transferred money to the operating reserve was in 2021. We transferred $4,036,033. And so for this year, we're putting the 5307, most of that money in operations. We're reappropriating the money from the state operating, and so we expect to have an excess revenue is going to be transferred to reserves. Right now, we're projecting to transfer $17,608,956. And of course, that is necessary. we were looking at a fiscal cliff, and there's no need to be on a fiscal cliff if you have an opportunity to transfer money to reserves to help us for that rainy day fund. So we're trying to be very aggressive, reducing expenses, maximizing our revenue so we have money for the future. And right now we're projecting that to be $17.6 million. Certainly subject to change after budget deliberations, but that's what we're looking at today. This schedule is our proposed service, our proposed projected revenue miles, hours, and ridership. And basically, this is what we base expenses on. This is what we base the number of operators on. All our other expenses is on our service plan. So for fixed route, which, big bus, if you look at the last column for fiscal year 24 budget, you see 6.5 million for miles, revenue hours. You see the ridership. You see it compared to fiscal year 23 in terms of miles. That's actually going down. That's based on, your service plan and your service delivery, which we'll have a detailed discussion on. And a lot of it is based on the impact of the last, I call it PIC, the last, what is it, Scott? Markup. Okay. Paratransit, you can see those miles, hours, and ridership. You see an increase in miles, increase in hours, increase in ridership from fiscal year 23. For streetcar, the miles, you can see those going down slightly, hours, just slight change, and ridership. We all know that the ridership on the streetcar has been going up, every month. And so we're projecting 1.6 million in ridership on streetcar, and then all HART, which is a combination of fixed route, paratransit, and streetcar. And those are the bottom numbers. Revenue miles, 8.6 million. Revenue hours, 691,000, and ridership, almost 12.2 million rides. In terms of expenses,
I never know whether to interrupt, but it's hard if you go past these screens when they're so detailed. I guess it would be an independent discussion, but so it looks like we went down in revenue miles service in 22. Then we went up in 23, kind of almost near what we have for 21. But then it looks like a pretty significant drop proposed for 24. And then the revenue hours, looks like the same kind of thing. And the ridership, however, just keeps growing, which I think it's important for us to understand, because I hear people say, "Oh, HART doesn't have any riders," or things like this. I just think it's very important for them to know here that we're, with less money, we're doing more ridership. And that's a really significant, important point, and by a lot. I mean, we've increased by 21, fiscal 21. I know part of this was COVID, and but we had almost in fiscal 21, it's almost 9 million rides, and we go up to in fiscal 24, 10.2. And I just, a year. And I think it's, and we're not even including, and we could go through the same exercise when we do paratransit, streetcar, and all those put together. But this is just fixed route service for our buses. And I just think it is so important for people to understand that message. Less money, more service. There is not a problem in terms of having ridership. We have people that desperately want service and more service, but we're working with, less revenue and inflation. So I just am emphasizing that, and it looks like the story repeats itself in terms of our paratransit, which again is about, and I think people don't recognize this, like 1/6 of our system, it looks like, is for those people who, and that doesn't count the people that ride buses that need that service. This is outside of that have specialized paratransit service for people who need those kinds of special services for handicap or disabilities. And then that doesn't include the streetcar either, which is much the same thing again. And I guess I'm really concerned about the future in terms of, and I know you haven't been here very long, and one budget I don't have a full grasp on, and I probably will need to look at it soon, is the streetcar. I heard you say the discussion is, and we've been providing free service on the streetcar for, you might know, Mr. Drainville, how many years now? I guess, now I shouldn't, free service, but it's been subsidized by FDOT, which didn't used to subsidize it, and then the other operations is paid for by the city of Tampa. Is that the case?
City of Tampa and some CRAs, yes.
So, and right now is FDOT providing about $1 million in operations?
700,000.
700,000, thank you. So if we need to look at that, I just want to understand the impacts of that or how we go after that, how that works, because the ridership has gone up incredibly, as we know. And it's not just because it's free service, which is helpful, but it's because it's way more service than it used to be. So that's, which is a good thing. If only we could do that on so much else.
Right. And I always say that it's free to the customers. It is not free service. As you said, it is subsidized service. But in terms of the service plan, and if you want to ask additional questions, Omar is here. Certainly he developed this chart for me. But we do have an entire presentation devoted to this.
And I won't go
okay.
belabor it, but it is the business of HART. And I think it's really significant. 70% is our operations. And I just think this is like such an important chart in so many ways that I just didn't want to pass by it without noting it also. And, and noting the fact that we've been doing good service for all these years with such limited resources. I know I'm beating just a drum that, but it's just important to understand that. And I think the, people of Hillsborough County understand that. They seem to keep wanting to help to move this forward. But I'll just say it again because we're here at this time and I'm looking at this chart.
Thank you.
Okay, in terms of budget assumptions for expenses, salary and wages, $53 million. That's based on 793 FTEs. Of that amount, non-bargaining is 137. Bargaining is 656. Of that 656, 601 ATU and 55 Teamsters. Again, non-bargaining 137, bargaining 656. The total, again, 793. 773 of those positions are filled. We do have 31 vacancies, and this gets to your question, Ms. Williams. We have 31 vacancies. Right now, we plan to budget for 20 of those vacancies, and 11 of those vacancies we will keep on hold and not finance in the fiscal year 24 budget. But as I stated in the last presentation, the interim CEO has asked us to look at these numbers. We've met with every director to go over their staffing. We'll continue to have discussions so that we make sure that in that final budget, the staff is right size for the success of HART. So we're looking at that.
Excuse me, Ms. Kirk.
Yes.
Ms. Kemp?
I think it would be good. I know you put out those numbers. I think it would be good if we had those numbers on a screen too, the bargaining, non-bargaining, so we
Yes.
continue to get the idea of the number of positions
Okay.
and how they
Okay.
work in the agency.
Okay. It'll be in future presentations, and if you'd like, our interim CEO will be glad to send you those numbers. Okay. All right, for fringe benefits, for healthcare, $11 million. We have projected the increase to be 10%, but will be in consultation with our broker to make sure that that's a good estimate. That's been the estimate for the past years. We all know how healthcare increases constantly, but we'll tie that number down. And then other fringe benefits, the biggest one in that is certainly the pension. Right now, that's budget $11.5 million. Operational contract services, and what I've done this year is just kind of listed out the type of expenses that are in every category, so you know what we're budgeting for. For operational contract services, almost $10 million, $9,999,461. For parts and supplies, $5.8 million. You can see that that's shop supplies, the chemicals, the tools, the computer equipment, safety supplies, and other equipment. For fuel, almost $5 million, $4,969,632. You can see that it includes the gasoline, transmission fluids, antifreeze, the diesel, the fuel for the CNG buses, and you can see the projections below. We're budgeting currently, again, subject to change, $1.07 for the diesel gallon equivalent for CNG. Diesel fuel, $3.74, and unleaded, $2.85. You can see that those numbers have come down considerably from last year. Administrative other, $417,892. Administrative contract services, $1.3 million. Legal services, $1.3 million. Utilities, $853,000. Marketing and printing, $292,000. Taxes and fees, $267,000. So based on what I've shared with you, this is the proposed budget. This is the operating budget summary. This is revenue, total budget, $104,146,833. You can see that that is less than last year. Again, we're looking at all expenses, trying to adjust all expenses. Last year, we budgeted for all staff. We are freezing some positions in fiscal year 24, and we looked at other expenses that we could reduce. And the 104, 146, 833, you can see, is net of the $17 million that we want to transfer to reserve. And I've gone over each of these numbers, so, yes.
Ms. Kirk, the numbers you described for each category, are they incorporated within the budget summary?
Yes, I was just saying, these are the numbers that I just went over. So for the ad valorem revenue in a former sheet is 67. So this is a summary of all of those numbers I just presented to you.
Just add them all up.
Thank
Ad
you.
valorem is it starts on 10, page 10, or the slide 10. That starts with the revenue summaries, and this is just a summary of all those numbers I gave you.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay? All right. Any questions on any further questions on revenue? Okay.
Do we see any risks in the assumption at this point? I know that we are recommending the $17 million be transferred into the reserve, but based on the overall ridership, I think that was what Commissioner Kemp was talking about, the increase in ridership, and then seeing our budget decrease, we are going to have to do more with less, but do we see any risk or any concerns that we need to be made aware of at this point, considering the actions, or at least the initial overview?
Not that I see, but I'll ask the interim CEO. We've, discussed this in detail, and go ahead.
So, again, this is our base budget, and this is, if you look at ad valorem, it's very conservative. So at this point, the risk is minimal.
Okay, this slide is a summary of the operating expenses. I've gone through each one of the, in detail, but this is a summary for the operating expenses, the total of those numbers that I discussed, $104,146,833. Understanding that it is a balanced budget, revenues and expenses always equal at the budget time. Any further questions on expenses? Okay, this is a calculation. You know that our policy requires us to have a minimum of 90 days operating expenses in the reserve. We know we have not been able to achieve that in recent years, but the budget at $104 million, the 90 days or 3 months would be $36 million. This is where we project to be at going into fiscal year 24, and where we project to be at the end of fiscal year 24. Right now, we have $17 million in operating reserves, compared to what we're supposed to have in terms of $26 million. But with the $17 million transfer, we should have $34 million at the end of the year. Understand that the operating reserve is a rainy day fund. And when you need it, you have to use it. So we're really setting it aside for fiscal year 25 and future years. And the other reserves we don't expect to increase or decrease. I did mention that we may use some of the capital reserve if we need to, some of that $4 million, but we will come back to you if we need to use it for capital projects. And I just want to mention that now that the audit is over, I do have to look at the actuarials and adjust the risk reserves, the self-insurance reserves for risk and medical. They may change just based on the recent actuarial studies. Okay, this is our 5-year capital plan. Total for the 5 years right now, we're looking at $297,327,352 for the 5 years. Understanding that and we will go over this in detail in a future presentation also, understanding that when you have a 5-year plan, the first year is your capital budget. And so you can see the 5-year plan for each year, fiscal year 24, 25, 26, 27, and 28. But the first column, fiscal year 24, is your proposed capital budget. And I'm not reading this in detail, if that's okay with you.
Everybody should keep in mind that this is the first pass.
Yes.
Okay, this is not a final budget. We are all encouraged to look at it, scratch at it, ask questions, pick at it, find, scratch and sniff and see what we come up with. Make sure it's what. One thing that would be helpful going forward, if we could,
Sure.
I don't want to reinvent the wheel, but we have. Most of this is coming out with a actual 21, actual 22, 23 budget, and then a 24 budget. But the part that might be a little confusing is there's no 23 projection. Okay, I don't know if you could put one together for us relatively quickly, but we can see, we're going to end up at X number of dollars for fuel, and then we make a transition into the budget. You know, and a little bit of a disconnect, but I think it would help us as members of the Finance and Audit, so that when we sit down with the board, yes, it makes sense, or no, it doesn't make sense type of thing. It's a gut check. Particularly now we're dealing with the 5-year capital plan. Our initial concern is the first column, okay? Because everything else could change at a red hot minute, and then it's a projection. It's down the road. But the first column is what we have to be particularly concerned with at this point, at this juncture in the whole process. So, and I'll shut up.
No, we can certainly send you the 23 projection. We do have that information, and if you would like Scott to send, Mr. Drainfield to send it to you before the next
That'd be
meeting,
good.
he can do that.
That'd be good.
Okay, thank you.
Yes.
And I know this is an initial sweep, so
Yeah.
I don't mean to drag it on, but just to, and we don't have to answer this right now because it might take too long, but I just think 2 things to look at. Our technology goes down from 14 million. I figure that's probably Flamingo, to 4 million, to, eventually it goes to 17,000 from 14 million over 5 years. So that's, and then bus rapid transit is built in here, which I find interesting, to begin in 2025 for 15 million. And those are just 2 things I'll, in the future, have questions or.
Okay. And again, we do have a presentation devoted to this.
That's why I hate.
Okay.
I don't mean to keep dragging this on by bringing these up, but.
Okay, but I'll just show the slides with the detail very quickly. I won't read them, but just put them up here. This is the total for vehicles and maintenance for the 5 years, 118 million, and you can see the 23 million for 24. You see the number for 25. So these slides, if you take time to go through, it gives you that detail. Facilities and construction, the detail, 101 million for the almost 102 million for the 5 years. The first year, 24, is $2.8 million. This is the technology, and this is the slide, Commissioner Kemp, that you would look at. You can see that fiscal year 24, they have the CAD AVL, computer-aided dispatch, automatic vehicle locator system, and the radio replacement is budgeted for fiscal year 24. And that's why you see the large number for 24. Buses and shelter total for the 5 years. And then, as you mentioned, the bus rapid transit, the planning studies for the 5 years, safety and security. And safety and security were mandated to spend a certain portion, 1.75% of the program of projects on safety and security. So you'll always see safety and security projects, and then some maintenance equipment. Again, for the total 5-year plan, $297.3 million. So this is the capital budget for, which one is this? Okay, the headings are improper, but anyway, the total budget for 24 is the second column, third column, $42.1 million for revenues and expenses. So we take the total expenses, the 42.1, and then we have to match them with revenues. We don't budget anything that we don't expect to receive revenues for, because that would be unrealistic. And so if there is a project that we don't have funding for, then we'll put it in another year of the capital plan and hopefully get money when that year comes. So we're expecting to receive $45 million in revenues, $42.1 million in revenues, and so you can see the total project's $42.1 million. And these next few slides are simply the detail of that. So, with vehicles and maintenance, we always try to budget for some buses. And then facilities and construction, heavy maintenance, you just approve the beginning for the program manager. And so that's certainly budgeted for this upcoming year. Technology, The CAD AVL is budgeted in fiscal year '24. Bus stops and shelters, planning, and safety and security. Total $42.1 million. So with that, we will ask that you recommend that the HART Board of Directors approve the fiscal year '24 proposed budget and authorize the interim CEO to submit the approved proposed budget to Hillsborough County, the City of Tampa, and the City of Temple Terrace.
So moved.
I had a question.
Please recognize.
Thank you. The bus stops and shelters, is that not budgeted in 2024? Proposed budget?
And I was looking at that. I believe that we didn't put any new money, but we have a substantial contract that we approved for fiscal year '23. I'll ask Linda to look at that because
Okay.
I saw that.
Thank you.
23 has a huge chunk in it that's not going to get spent, and that'll get pushed over into '24. So this is one of those timing things.
Yeah, this
Okay.
is new money. This is new projects, but we have the $5 million that we received from, the congressional earmark or community project that they call it. But that's new projects.
Okay.
But we will look at that.
Thank you.
The budgeting aspect is a very, very complex timing waltz that everything's got to kind of fall together at the same time. Any other questions?
I'll just bring up one more.
Sure.
The heavy maintenance building renovation and reconstruction, we've had lots of conversation on that, and I'd like to see an update, whether that comes from you, Ms. Kirk, or from the appropriate department, that gives us a continuous update of what the plan is, where we are in the plan, and so forth. I still feel like we've not made as much progress as I'd like to make.
I'm pointing to the interim CEO.
Okay.
Yes, we
Thank you.
definitely will have an update whether it be in this committee or the safety and ops, we would definitely have
Okay.
Dan Rodriguez is the internal project manager. He can give an update once a month. So.
Okay, thank you.
Good deal. Okay, recognizing that this is a first pass and that there's going to be changes made going forward until we come up with a final budget, which again will flow through till the month of August. But finance needs a framework to work within, as well as to supply the proposed budget, again, as a framework to the City of Tampa, Hillsborough County, and City of Temple Terrace. We need to, I'd like a motion to advance this interim budget proposal to the full HART board for the June 5th meeting. So there's going to be a second? Okay. Ms. Danielle, we have a motion and a second.
Chair Schisler,
Yes.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously, sir.
Thank you very much. Please look at this. The supporting schedules that are here really help to reinforce where the numbers come from. And if you have any questions, please let Ms. Kirk know, and we'll get them answered before the meeting on the 5th. Okay, moving right along, we are now down to committee action items. We've done A, B, and C. So we're up to 5D. If you'll forgive my voice, it's waning. The committee 5D is for the committee to form a recommendation to the HART board to authorize the interim CEO to award a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options to TGH, Tampa General Hospital, for DOT and non-DOT physicals, medical review officer, drug and alcohol testing, not to exceed amount of $962,113,000. In your packets, there's a write-up with the proposed resolution in support of this item. Do committee members have any questions or comments? Is the 962 spread out evenly? I didn't see this. Is it spread out evenly or?
Yes, it is. It's the base period plus the option periods.
So it covers 5 years total.
Yes.
Okay. Any questions by anybody?
Move approval.
Okay, motion to move it to the full board for approval at the fifth meeting. Second. Roll call vote, please.
Committee Chair Schisler,
Aye.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Very
Thank you,
good, thank you. Item 5E, the write-up proposed resolution to form a recommendation to the HART Board to authorize the interim CEO to award a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options for legal services, labor and employment to Bennett, Jacobs, and Adams, PA, not to exceed an amount of $869,220, and Roper, PA, in a not to exceed amount of $352,000. Any questions by committee?
I'll move approval.
Okay, this would be moved to approve for the full board. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Okay. Ms. Danielle?
sir. Committee Chair Schisler,
Aye.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Thank you. 5F is the committee to form a recommendation to the HART Board to authorize the interim CEO to award a 3-year contract with 2 one-year options. Whoops. No, okay, different. One-year options for legal services, workman's comp to Bennett, Jacobs, and Adams, PA, in a not-to-exceed amount of $335,695, and Sponsler, Johnson, and Andrews, PA, in a not-to-exceed amount of $280,225. Workman's comp would cover both. Or am I reading that wrong?
Yes, award contracts to both of them for workers' comp.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, okay.
Move approval.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Committee Chair Schisler,
Aye.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
The motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, item 5G, motion motion to recommend to the HART Board to authorize the interim CEO to award a 3-year base with 1 2-year option contract to Steps Towing Services, STEP Inc., for towing services in a not-to-exceed amount of $554,738. Any questions of staff on this item? Do we have a motion to approve?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
Danielle?
Committee Chair Schisler,
Aye.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Very good, thank you. Item 5H, to recommend to the HART Board to authorize the interim CEO to modify the existing contract for regional, state, and federal legislative consulting and governmental relations services with Holland and Knight LLP to extend the contract for a 3-month period through September 30th, 2023, and add funds to the amount of $36,000 to the base period for a base period not to exceed amount of $432,000. Any questions?
And why is that?
Why are we
Why
doing
is that?
So this just gives staff enough time to create a new solicitation because we weren't going to use the option, that 1-year option.
Okay.
A motion to move this forward to the full board.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Roll call vote, please.
Committee Chair Schisler,
Aye.
Committee Member Kemp,
Yes.
Committee Member Knight,
Yes.
Committee Member Williams.
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Okay, item 5I, for the committee to form a recommendation to the HART Board to authorize the interim CEO to extend the transit advertising contract with Vector Media Transit LLC for 6 months with an end date not to exceed December 31st, 2023. Do we have any questions or comments of staff? Do we have a motion?
I'll make a motion And I just, I think there's still a very strong sentiment on the board to change the way that we've been doing the advertising on our, I know this is I guess this is a bus, and after this, it's a bus shelter. But, as we move forward, I'll just like to make sure that that's out there.
Make sure it doesn't wither on the vine. Do we have a motion? Do we have a second?
Second.
Ms. Danielle?
Committee Chair Schisler?
Aye.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously.
Very good. Okay, item 5J. Let's see. To recommend to the HART Board of Directors to authorize the interim CEO to extend the bus shelter and bench advertising contract with Signal Outdoor Advertising, DBA Insight Street Media, up to 6 months with an end date not to exceed December 31st, 2023. Any questions or comments for staff? Seeing none, entertain a motion to approve or to move forward with this.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Danielle?
Committee Chair Schisler?
Aye.
Committee Member Kemp?
Yes.
Committee Member Knight?
Yes.
Committee Member Williams?
Yes.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I believe that is all of the action items. Next, we'll move forward to procurement monitoring for sole source awards and deviation from the procurement manual report. Mr. Drainville.
So since the last committee, Westmatic was the only sole source. It was $12,637. And then sole source total for year to date was $947,944.
Okay, any questions or comments for anybody? Okay, task order contract monitoring. Mr. Drainville.
Since the last committee, there has been no task orders issued either for BTI or the A&E contracts. So for the A&E general consultant, task orders has been issued for just under 2.6 million, and for BTI, task orders have been issued for just under 4.5 million.
Any questions or comments? Okay, appeared to be none. Is there any old business for this committee? Yes, ma'am.
Yes, thank you. In regards to our bus stop and shelters, the benches and so forth, I know we've been working on changing those out, but as we go along and open new stops and so forth, I'd like to understand our strategy on going back and putting in benches where we have a stop and what our strategy is going forward when we open another stop. So if we could get some clarity and just a good understanding of our strategy, because there's several bus stops that, it rains, people are standing, and there's no bench or there's no shelter. So I'm not sure how and what our plan is in regards to that.
We can provide that. We actually have a strategy, so we could provide that next meeting.
Okay. So it just, for the purposes of me understanding, is our intent to have a bench at every stop?
A bench, yes, not so much a shelter, because of ADA requirements, but a bench, yes.
Okay.
How many would that be?
So right now, Linda's in the audience, so she can come up. Her team does have a strategy on.
Good morning, Linda Crescentini, Director of Program Management. We have a shelter program, and we can provide an update for you on that, but there aren't going to be shelters at every stop. There's only going to be shelters at certain locations that the ridership is high. There's certain criteria that has to meet in order to get a shelter.
Okay. And maybe we could do a review of the criteria for the shelter, but as far as a bench at each stop, is it our recommendation or our strategy to make sure there's a bench? And I'm just bringing it up. If you don't
Sure.
have an answer,
Sure.
you want to go back and
We can come
it.
back and present that, but it's not to have a bench at every stop. Some stops are just poles, And some of the new technology that we are looking at may have a lean pole, associated with like solar lighting, but it's not necessarily a bench at every single stop.
Okay. And
But I can get the metrics for you and explain what our current program looks like and what it will look like in the future.
Okay, thank you. I think that would be good for, at least for me to understand where we put benches and where we place shelters. And when we see those things happening where it's raining or there are a number of people there, I ask myself the question, how do we reconcile
Sure.
what we already have out there and what we do going forward?
Absolutely. We can do that.
Thank you.
Very good. Okay, any new business? Yes, sir.
Real quickly, the customer that came in earlier from the hospital, Advent, with information as far as the bus stop and some of the employees from the hospital riding, maybe that would be followed up, trying to get more information on it. I know can't do everything, but at least listen and see what, because every time I've asked from the community, the department has been very prompt on looking and see if it's a need or whatever like that. So I'm just saying to follow up there. We just don't listen, not.
Definitely, we
Okay.
could follow up, and I know staff's been taking notes, so.
Okay, thank you.
Before we adjourn, I'd like to thank staff for enduring the length of the meeting, but I'd also like to thank the committee members. There's an awful lot of numbers thrown at us today, and it can be somewhat mind-numbing. So thank you very much for your patience and perseverance through this. This meeting's adjourned. Have a good afternoon.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, everyone.